It's Goud, and you're listening to the Goud Crowd radio show. I do not have a producer today, so it's just me. And you'll see, I was going to do a call-in show, and I guess because I don't have a producer, you won't be able to call the normal radio line. But I've put my phone number into you can see it at the thing at the bottom of the screen. If you want to call and make a comment, you can call my number, and then I can just hold up the phone to the speaker or the microphone, and then people can hear it that way. And just so you know, the number is 385-237-7960. That is my personal phone number, but it's already pretty public, so I'm not really worried about people knowing it or whatever. So today, as I've advertised, we are going to talk about how Republicans can win in Salt Lake County. And the reason we're going to cover this topic is, as we discussed last week, Salt Lake County was actually pretty much, I would say, a disaster for the Republican Party. And this is despite spending a lot of time and a lot of effort trying to win more races and turn things in a county that is increasingly trending leftward. And that's even the case because initially, I think last week, there was some reporting saying that Utah as a whole had trended left this election, but it turned out that the people that put out the map didn't realize that Utah takes an additional 13 days after Election Day. And that's in addition to the amount of time they spent before Election Day processing and counting ballots. And I specifically say processing because that is most of what they do is not actually counting votes. It's signature verification, it's duplicating and adjudicating ballots. It's all sorts of things that we have to do because we have a mail-in system instead of a system where you go in person, show your photo ID, and you vote. So everybody who went in person, showed your photo ID and voted, you're actually the ones that make the process simple. Everybody who votes by mail, you make it way more complicated than it needs to be. So that's on you that it's taking so long for to get results. After they fully processed the ballots, it turned out that Utah had moved to the right a little bit. It's one of the lower moves to the right or more pro-Trump, but Salt Lake County had still moved to the left. And I think that's where the problem is because Salt Lake County is a third of the population of our state. It has, and I think it represents an even bigger portion of the state's economy. But I'm not as concerned about that as I am about that numbers problem, because if you look at other states where there's one big state that dominates the entire state, what you'll find is that eventually that state will overtake the rest of the state and change it permanently. And once Democrats start taking over your state legislature and your governor, mark my words, every single time they do it, they will get rid of election security measures. They will reduce transparency. It's all very purposeful and it's all aimed at the same thing, and that is to make it so that you can never win an election again. And so I want to kind of talk about, again, how we turn this around in Salt Lake County. Now, let me just start I'll give you a little summary of what we talked about last week. We went through all of the different races in Salt Lake County, and overall, like I said, at the county level, it was very bad. And this is a continuation of 2022. So in 2022, we lost the three big marquee races. So the Salt Lake County DA's office, the Salt Lake County Clerk's office, and the Salt Lake County Sheriff's office. We also lost the at-large county council seat. And that was, I think, the one flip from Republican to Democrat in terms of those countywide races. And notable because the Democrat who won it is Suzanne Harrison. She's a left-wing, I would say, a lunatic. And she sells herself as a moderate. But all you have to do is really scratch beneath the surface. And she is left-wing, wants to trans children, wants men and women's locker rooms and bathrooms. She literally is okay with a man with his equipment going into the locker room and showering and changing with your daughter. No issues with that at all. That's a left-wing lunatic. But she's able to sell herself as some moderate, which is false. And we'll talk about this a little bit more, because I think a lot of the reason she's able to do that is because our press is pretty left-wing, and we're not good at, as Republicans, let me make that clear. As Republicans, we're not good at using the press and getting our issues out there. The Democrats they dominate the press very well, and we have to learn how to counter that. So that was 22. All the candidates were massively outspent by the Democrats in 22. So that's another thing to keep in mind. But I don't think that is decisive. Trump showed that on the national level, because he spent 1/3 of what Kamala Harris spent, but dominated on issues and dominated the media. So you can win by spending less money. And so I just, keep that in your mind as we keep talking today. In 2024, so this latest cycle, we lost the mayor's race. We lost the at-large county council seat. We lost the treasurer's race, the recorder's race. And let's see here. Sorry, I've got some notes to help me through this. And then we also lost, let's see, the county, maybe that's all of them. Yeah, because we won the assessor's race, but we won that by a lot less than last time. And then we held on to D. Theodore's seat, but also won that by a lot less than last time. And we won some other kind of like more regional seats. But overall, it was kind of, we lost them. Overall, my point is, it was a disaster for Republicans. I thought if we want to talk about kind of the money issue, there's a couple of them that were kind of interesting. In the mayor's race, there was a total of, Jenny Wilson, the Democrat incumbent, spent $594,000 to win that race. Her opponent, Aaron Ryder, spent $161,000. And it ended up being 55-45 with Mayor Wilson winning. And Mayor Wilson got about 273,000 votes, while Aaron Ryder got about 224,000 votes. So that's about a 50,000 vote spread, right? A big difference in terms of spending. And I'll say, I thought Aaron Ryder actually had very good issues. And she actually did some good media stuff, right? So she had some very open Democrats cross over and support her. She did a debate with Jenny Wilson. I think Aaron Ryder did a good job in that debate. Jenny Wilson seemed very lost. But there's something that happened there that clearly didn't connect, or maybe a lot of people didn't know about it. I'll just show you. I had posted a weekly rundown story about this, and I got a lot of comments, right? So let me show you one, because this person actually said that, here, let me share it, and then I'll tell you what the person said, right? Okay, here we go. So it's this comment right here. This person, stars to moon, said on X, "No one even tried to win in the mayor's race. It almost looks arranged. I had to go look to see who was running. It is all BS." Now, let me just say again, Aaron Ryder was running in this race, and I thought she was very good on issues. But if this person didn't even see her, that's a little bit of or didn't know about her. That shows that there was some sort of breakdown there, right? And we need to look at that and try to figure out, how do we fix this going forward? Because if a candidate is running, has good issues, in this case, one of her great issues was this deferred maintenance issue, which I thought was, I heard about it when I saw her give a speech at a fundraiser. I thought it was a great issue. And it showed somebody who's wasting taxpayer money and is making it so our taxes are going up. Because if you know anything about Jenny Wilson, she's a big spending liberal Democrat, right? She is not a conservative. She's not a fiscal conservative. She doesn't care about your money. She just wants to go on collecting more and more of your hard-earned money. and then giving it to her political benefactors. She has way too many deputy mayors. It's something like 6 or 7 of them. They're political appointees, and these are just patronage jobs to her supporters. She gives out millions of dollars to nonprofits. I guarantee if you start digging into these nonprofits, they are run by Democrats. A lot of the money, the tax money they're taking to nonprofits is really just a money laundering scheme to their supporters. Because here's the deal. If you work at a nonprofit and you want to raise money, you should go and raise money from everybody and get the money yourself, not go and use taxpayer money. I'd rather keep more of my taxpayer money, and I'll give to the nonprofits I want to give to. So, and that's kind of what I mean by she is not a fiscal conservative. Now, she sells herself as a moderate, but I'll tell you, one of the issues I thought was kind of missing in this race was the fact that Jenny Wilson supported allowing men to go into women's locker rooms and restrooms as long as they were nude but not lewd. So again, if you're a normal person out there, do you want men in the women's locker room or bathroom? And, like we went and we were able to, I guess, improve the situation with the state legislature, because I was the one that actually worked on this issue. I worked with a woman, we exposed that men were being allowed to use women's locker rooms in Salt Lake County. We took that issue and we tried to get the Salt Lake County Council to fix it. But before we went to Salt Lake County Council, the woman who I worked with emailed Salt Lake County Mayor Jenny Wilson and complained that she had been in the locker room multiple times when men with everything intact walked in while she was in the locker room. In one case, the guy had on a pink mini skirt and a pink gas mask. So that's someone that's probably not mentally well. When she complained to Jenny Wilson's response to her was, if you, the woman, have a problem with men or trans women, but they're really just men, in the women's locker room, you, the woman, need to go and use an individual changing room. And then when we went to the Salt Lake County Council and we tried to get them to change the law, in testimony, the director of the Salt Lake County Parks and Recreation, who was appointed by Jenny Wilson, said that men could be in women's locker rooms as long as they are nude but not lewd. Now, I would say if a man is in the women's locker room, I don't care if you've had surgery. I don't care if you're taking hormones. I don't care if you have makeup on. You are still a man. You should not be in the women's locker room. And by being in there, you're being lewd, inherently lewd. And but she supported that. And I honestly think that should have been an issue in that race, because most people support the conservative position on this. And that is that you should not let men in women's locker rooms. And this informs us how Jenny Wilson reacts to any issue. So while we kind of solved that problem, for the most part, there's going to be other issues that pop up in the next 4 years, and Jenny Wilson will 100% be on the wrong side of all those issues. We already know that. And so I think that would have been a good issue. And we'll talk more about this, because I think one of the things that our party lacks is general swagger, meaning we don't, in Utah, we have a culture where a lot of people are afraid of this idea of being mean to people or disrespectful. And I think what that leads to is, number one, bad policy. A lot of Republicans will compromise on policy issues because they're afraid of being called a bigot. But it also means that we're not sending, like our elected officials don't run on issues when they solve them. So this is an example of that. I think a lot of Republicans are afraid to run saying, I am going to keep men out of women's bathrooms and restrooms. I opposed that from the beginning. Jenny Wilson was for it. I don't want, I'll quote Nancy Mace, there's not going to be balls in stalls, in the women's stalls, right? And actually this Nancy Mace thing is a good example. Overall, Nancy Mace is a total attention-seeking kind of and annoying. But at the same time, on this issue, she's actually right. And she's been giving these awesome, unapologetic defenses of women's spaces. And I wish we had that going on in Utah as well. But what you'll see is that elected Republicans or even Republican candidates are really afraid to talk about this in that kind of clear messaging that is, this is wrong. We are not compromising on it. It's okay to be mean. I mean, you're not really being mean to these people by telling them the truth, right? If you're a man trying to transition into a quote unquote woman, you can't actually transition. But it's actually honest to tell that person, you'll never be a woman. And in fact, if we did that, I think a lot fewer people would actually try to transition. We have a society, though, of people that are too nice. And when you're too nice, you end up with a situation where people go down a path that will never work for them. So that's what I would say to you is I wish we had kind of that stronger messaging. And I think it would have helped in the mayor's race, because the fact that we had to go and solve it at the legislature doesn't give Jenny Wilson a pass. She's still a left-wing woman who is totally fine with men going into the women's locker room with you. Okay, let me just, before I continue, once again, you're listening to the Goud Crowd on KMMU. You can find us on X and on kmmu.org, as well as on YouTube and Rumble. So if you want to call in, feel free to call in. My cell phone, today's phone line, is open. It's 385-237-7960. Now, the other race we'll just quickly kind of touch on is this at-large county council seat. I think a lot of people expected this to flip to Republican, right? We had a very prominent Republican who ran. She got actually very positive press coverage. It turns out she spent more money than the Democrat. This is a little bit unusual to see in local races in Salt Lake County. So in that one, Rochelle Morris spent $331,000, while Natalie Pinckney only spent $222,000. Again, getting to my point that this isn't really about the amount of money you spend. I think it's about issue dominating and more. There's more. Well, we'll talk about more, but just that's at least one aspect of this. And then ground game. I think Pinckney, part of this might be ground game. Her ground game was better than Rochelle's. So in that race, though, we ended up, Pinckney got 246,000 votes about, and Rochelle Morris got about 238,000 votes. So a very close race, but in this is an example where the Republican spent more money than the Democrat and still lost by about 8,000 votes. So just again, keep that in mind. It's not just a money issue. There's something else there. I suspect this one might have been ground game. And let me add one other thing before we continue. One thing people should be asking for is we want the current leadership of the Salt Lake County GOP to report and let us know, about their efforts to win races this year. Let me show you what the Utah Democrat Party put out. I actually was surprised by this. So give me 1 second. Okay. If you're looking at the screen, this is a press release that the Utah Democratic Party put out. And they said that they reached over 250,000 voters since May 1st of 2024 with over 60,000 conversations. And it's from phone banking to texting to door knocking. Organized Utah is working to persuade undecided voters and get Democratic voters out to the polls. Thanks to the support of a large coalition of partners, remember that, the Utah Democratic Party is leading the charge to elect Democrats in highly competitive districts. The Utah Democratic Party and Organized Utah have provided free resources to Democratic candidates, including campaign coaching, strategy consultation, data administration, logo design, website design, flyer design, and access to a predictive dialer, making it far easier for campaigns to reach large numbers of voters over the phone. These investments have saved Democratic campaigns thousands of dollars, ensuring that they can focus on talking to voters about the issues that matter most to them. They did a lot of stuff, right? I mean, this is an impressive list of efforts that the Utah Democratic Party put into this. I think I would like to hear from the Salt Lake County GOP what they did in Salt Lake County in terms of these issues, these types of ground game issues that the Democrats talked about? Did they give people campaign coaching? What a great idea. Strategy consultation, data administration. Did we help people design logos? How about website design, flyer design, access to a predictive dialer? Like, think about this. You could have people making phone calls starting during the summer. What a great idea. So, this is something I believe we want to get a report from our own party leadership, and we need to get it sooner rather than later, right? We just, I think, lost a lot of races in Salt Lake County that we should have won. So it would be good if, something for people to ask and see if we can get it. Now, let me what I promised you today is we will walk through what I think is a roadmap on how to win in Salt Lake County. Before we start, let me just again remind you, if you want to call in, it's 385-237-7960. So, again, feel free to call in at any point in time because I can get started back on what I'm talking about after your call. And I want to hear from you. So give me 1 second. Okay, let me do this. So, okay, let me kind of walk you through what I think we need to see in leadership at the Salt Lake County GOP in order to start winning races. Because I actually think Salt Lake County is winnable, but it's going to take some effort, and it's really going to take effort, vision, effort, and execution. And sometimes you can get kind of the vision piece of this, but the execution piece can be missing. So you need leaders who actually understand how to execute projects. I'll just give you an example. When in 2021, I ran the Salt Lake County GOP's Election Integrity Committee. When we did that committee, we used to meet every single weekend for months on end. And it was virtual meetings, right? Because, if you meet in person, you're adding all sorts of time to because they're going to have to drive to a central location and meet up and stuff like that. But you do these things by Zoom. You keep everybody on task. You keep everything moving along. You know where things are going. And at the end of that, we were actually able to put out a product. And so you want leaders who can actually do that type of execution. I'm not sure that we have that right now. And so I would suggest we want to make sure we're looking for someone who has vision and understands how to execute that vision. So I think one big thing at the Salt Lake County GOP that we want to see is we need to look for ways to multiply our efforts. Like I just said, the Utah Democratic Party said that they were working with other groups. They have a large coalition of partners, right? Do we have something similar on our side? And I would say right now, I'm not sure that we do. There are constituent groups representing various types of people. So for example, I run the Utah Gay Straight Coalition. It's not officially associated with the Republican Party, but it's a conservative group of gays and allies. So gays, lesbians, and allies. Allies just means, I guess you're not gay or lesbian, but you want to work with us on policy issues. And we don't just work on gay issues, but the point is that's an organization more aimed at people that have the gay piece in common, right? That's one part. You've got there's something called the Salt Lake County Republican Women's Club. I heard this has been a little bit dormant. It might come back soon. That could be a big one. Down in Washington County, they have the Washington County Republican Women's Group. It's a huge organization. I went to a lunch they did, and there had to have been 150 or 200 people on a weekday for a lunch. If this Salt Lake County Republican Women's Party gets reconstituted and reinvigorated, it could actually be a really big piece of beginning to get more events where you could have debates, you could have people come and speak, you could make it really interesting and exciting, and start to kind of dominate on the messaging cycle, because that's what you're kind of looking for here is getting message out, getting people interested, and bringing them in different ways. So that's part of why you have these different groups as well, right? So a gay straight coalition can bring in more people who are gay who may not otherwise become part of the Republican Party, and it shows that you're accepting that. A women's one can bring in more women. Turns out men can also be in the women's club in the way that straights can be in the gay club. And so you're just bringing in more people. You're finding new ways to get them engaged. There's a young Republicans group, and I don't qualify because I'm 47, but I think you have to be under 40. And it's a very, attractive group of people, and they're conservatives. And it's nice to see that kind of younger energy. And so that's a great organization. And these are people that they're already involved in the party. So clearly, like, they probably have ambitions and stuff. Great area to tap into. You're going to have your college Republicans. And what you want to do is coordinate all these groups. This is, I think, something the Trump campaign did really good this cycle, right? They actually used or outsourced to outside groups a lot of their kind of ballot chasing efforts, door knocking efforts, and things like that. One example is the Turning Point Action Group that ran ballot chasing operations in Arizona and I think in Wisconsin. We should be using our constituent groups and our interest groups to do the same thing. Oh, another one is I think there's a Latino group, and I don't remember the exact name because I think there's two of them, but these are all groups that we should be utilizing for ground game, especially as we get into the election, but also as a way to grow the party and grow people to get more engaged in it. It's not just enough to have people be registered Republicans, because that's kind of a meaningless term. We want them to get more engaged with the party itself and be in one group, whatever that group is, so that we can then start to use them to be volunteers and to help us win elections. So that's one piece of it. The next thing you want, and I think this is an area where we have just been failing for years and years and years, and it's on messaging. I think we have a messaging problem in the party overall. And so there's like a few things that we can do here. Let me just give you an example of like messaging failures that happen. Like I said, earlier this year, or end of last year, actually, it was end of 2023, is when we started working on this, exposing that men were being allowed to use women's locker rooms in Salt Lake County's rec centers, and then going to the Salt Lake County Council to try to get this resolved, and then we ended up going to state legislature. Well, the legislature, when the Salt Lake County Council would not take care of it. So when we went to that Salt Lake County Council, I had put out some information, and before that, I had talked to some of the party leadership and said, "Hey, I'm going to put this out, and we would like your help on this." And we think it's a great issue because, most people don't want men in women's locker rooms or bathrooms. There's some people that are okay with it. I get that; those aren't really going to be our voters, but most people don't like it. So I said, if you guys could, I'm going to tweet this stuff out. And I think at the time we had the Utah Log Cabin Republicans, and we were using that Twitter handle to do this work. If you could retweet it, and in some cases, I think I even sent people actual tweets or messaging they could put out, like, here's a press release, here's some messaging you could put out to help us win this issue. And, honestly, like I put in this effort, and then it just kind of, nobody did it. And I was disappointed because I was like, we put in all this effort. We try to get them on board. This is coming straight out of the grassroots. It is a great issue, like a great issue. The trans issue was one of the top issues in this election. One of the top ads that Trump did was one where he talked about this: men invading women's sports, men invading women's locker rooms and restrooms. And the tagline was, "Kamala is for they, them, Trump is for you." Like this was a great issue. We were ahead of the curve on this, but we got ignored. There's just not that coordination, and I think part of the reason is we don't have the exercise. We're not doing this type of messaging and coordinating well enough to actually be able to push these issues out. And again, my earlier point about lack of swagger. A lot of people lack any sort of swagger on these issues. People think they're mean, and so they won't engage on it. If we have more swagger, if we are more confident in these types of issues and have better coordination, we can begin to dominate on that type of stuff. So I think that's why these issues though are important. Had that groundwork been laid all up and down the party, we could have used it as a better issue in races like that Salt Lake County mayor's race this year. Now I'll say this, I think the way you deal with this going forward is you have either one committee or multiple committees set up within the Salt Lake County GOP that will be focused on the marquee races coming up in 2026. Those races will be, you'll have the Salt Lake County Council at large county council seat, the one that Lori Stringham is in. I don't know exactly what will happen there, so that I don't know if I'd focus so much on that one. But you would have it focus on the Salt Lake County DA's race, the Salt Lake County Clerk's race, and the Salt Lake County Sheriff's race. The purpose of these committees is that they're going to be, watching these offices, making grandma requests, understanding different issues that are popping up, and beginning to gather the information we need so we can create kind of folders of information and then create messaging around what we're finding. So I'll give you an example. We could get last year, the Utah legislature, or I should say, sorry, I keep saying last year. It's really earlier this year. The Utah legislature passed a bill allowing men to be put into women's prisons if they meet certain requirements. And it's a long list of things, but if you understand Salt Lake County, it's run by very left people who are true believers in the trans agenda. And they will have no problem finding that a man who's pretending to be a woman meets the requirements in that bill. So for the Salt Lake County Sheriff's race, I think you look into, has she allowed any men into the women's prison, right? If she have any women gotten pregnant when that man has been in there? Have any women alleged rape, women prisoners? And you start to, if there is something there, that's a great issue to run on, right? For the next person to come up, who comes up to run against the current sheriff in 2026. But think about it this way. I said this in the last show, but one of the problems that candidates have is they have a short runway in order to get these issues out there. So the person who runs for sheriff in 2026 may not come up and decide to run until January of that year. And they may be a total unknown factor. So now you need someone to be able to make this issue an issue to set the foundation in 2025. And one thing you could do is, if you have a party chair who is better at engaging with the press, they can take these issues until you get candidates and start to put them out there. And so this is kind of part of why I think we need different leadership in our party leadership positions. We don't have anybody in really the state or county parties that is very comfortable talking to the press about issues. And I just want to give one caveat here. So, I'm on the Utah GOP State Central Committee, and one of the things I pushed was I think Brian Schott used to come to all of our meetings because as I've mentioned before, he's a little obsessed with me. And he'd always tweet about me, and it would be this very negative stuff, which I'm okay with. My main complaint about Brian was that he blocked me on X and making it impossible for me to respond, because I don't really care if you can tweet or post on X or whatever, social media, whatever you want about me. But within reason here, but try to have some connection to truth. But with Brian, the issue was he's a reporter. He has this huge reach. He posts all sorts of kind of salacious comments, but he doesn't allow you to respond. And I kind of think that's the key. They ended up just barring all press from the state central committee meetings because, number one, we didn't have like a great rule for how to deal with this. But number two, I think it's internal party business, and it's not necessarily needing to be in the press. So just so you understand that, it wasn't that I have an issue for the press at those types of meetings, but my issue was more, I think press should not block people, and they should allow them to respond. And what you find with the left-wing reporters is that they block people, but they don't block you because they think you're wrong or you're not effective. They block people who are correct and effective and will undermine their narrative, because someone like Brian Schott, I mean, he does some actual reporting, but most of what he does is really just pushing left-wing talking points. Anybody could do that, right? I think if you notice, like a lot of the left-wing press just kind of uses the same exact tired talking points, and they repeat the same words. which should be a good indication to you that it's somehow it's coordinated. I don't know how they do it. Maybe they have telepathy. Maybe they get like an email that they, every day, maybe they send out an email saying like, here's what we're going to talk about today. Trump is Hitler. Trump is a fascist, whatever, stuff like that. But the point is, we need to have party leadership that is more willing and able to engage with the press. Because what could happen is you have this committee set up and they're going and they're researching these issues because they would be researching them in 2025. And now let's say you find out, okay, the sheriff has allowed 5 men to go into the women's prison. To be clear, 5 men who are pretending to be women probably have autogynephilia, because if you understand the trans issue at all, if most men, adult men who transition actually have autogynephilia, which is a sexual fetish where you get turned on when somebody treats you like a woman. So they're not trans. They are actually getting turned on every time you call them by their female name. You call them Miss, you treat them like a woman. So let's say that she has allowed those people to go into, we find out she's allowed 5 people to go into the women's prison in Salt Lake County, or the women's jail. The party chair can be the person to expose that with the press. And now you've started to set a foundation because you're going to go on following up on this. And this will open up new possibilities, right? Because, you could go visit those people in jail, maybe talk to them. If there's, you could visit, I would visit both. Go and talk to the trans women, also known as men, who are in that women's jail, and talk to them about it. What did you have to go through to get here? What was the process like? Maybe you don't send someone like, who's more publicly anti the trans agenda. You find someone that's more maybe neutral on it so that they're more open, and you talk about it. You also talk if there's any victims of it, right? Maybe someone got pregnant, maybe someone alleged rape, and you start to expose these issues to the public. Another one is you would have them look into the district attorney's race. And I am sure that there is material there. The problem with the district attorney's race is that they are prosecuting so many cases, both civilly and criminally. And we have to really have people that can dig into that, because it's impossible for one person to do it. And we're going to have to find, go and get court documents. We're going to have to look at, are they, for example, an issue that could be happening, I don't know. Is he treating illegal aliens as tough as he is treating citizens for similar crimes? Because there is kind of this pressure, especially with left-wing district attorneys like Sim Gill, where they will reduce charges against illegal immigrants to make whatever they did a misdemeanor so that they don't get deported. Now, not that Biden's deporting anybody, but, as President Trump comes back in, people like that will make real efforts to make sure that these illegals can stay here. Why? I do not know, right? It's very unclear to me, but that's the reality of it. So we need to have people constantly doing research as to what's going on in that district attorney's office. And again, as you kind of find patterns, you find information, you need to expose that to the public. And then you're setting the foundation so that when someone decides to step up and run, they're not doing all the research by themselves. They don't just have to run because there's one case that was a problem. They'll have a whole slew of information to be able to run on. And then the party chair can get up and say, hey, look, we have spent the last year exposing to you all the problems in this office. We found someone that can fix it. Sim Gill's a mess. He's causing crime to go up. He's giving special deals to illegal aliens. He's doing this, whatever it is you find. And you say, this person, John Smith, he can do a better job. He will fix the problems with this office. And then you let that person kind of start to take over on the messaging part of it. And you want to do the same thing with the clerk's office, because that's your third marquee race that will happen in 2026. See, and with the clerk's race, you want to be looking to see what improvements she has made, right? Because she's made some improvements in response to pressure from the Republican Party. And this also shows you that, like having that kind of a committee, which we had that election integrity committee in 2021 into 2022, the data that we found in that while we did that, and the report that we did, that has been used to make all sorts of improvements, both at the state legislature, but also we've been able to pressure the current county clerk to be able to change stuff. She has felt pressure to change things. And I think actually she acts very differently than Sherry Swenson did, because she knows people are watching her and we know exactly how the system works. This is a very different dichotomy than what you had in the past. So what you want to do, though, is find out what are the other issues out there with this office. They haven't fixed it. I can guarantee you they have not fixed everything. And I would look into things like this. In 2022, George Soros and a bunch of his foreign billionaire friends funded her. There is a story there. We tried to expose it in 2022, but our local press is more left wing. So their automatic response to this was they did two things. Number one, there were no direct donations from George Soros to Lanny Chapman. Well, yeah, of course. I mean, Soros's big thing is that he hides his donations, and he does it. He basically money launders. He goes to different organizations to hide his participation, so nobody knows that he is funding these candidates, right? And so what you want to, as a person, as a party chair, they can do a better job of laying the foundation for this woman is not funded by Americans. She is primarily funded by foreigners, foreign billionaires. Why do they want her in office? How do they even know her, right? Her story, there's something weird there, and a committee could look into it. And let me give you another example of what's weird about her story. She went to one of the worst law schools in the country. Like, I mean, bad, like bottom. Like, I think it's like the third, like there's only 2 law schools that are worse than the ones she went to. How did somebody like that get a job at the Salt Lake County District Attorney's office, right? Is the DA's office that unable to recruit good candidates? Because typically people do look at law schools. I worked for a guy. Sorry, I'm gonna turn on my little light here. I was at my parents' house in San Diego, so my setup's a little bit different. You can't see it, but I worked for a guy in the federal government. This is years ago, and he actually told us when we were looking for applicants, I only want law schools from the top 15 law schools. I will not hire people that have not gone to those law schools. And you know what? Because he could recruit people from the best law schools. So like, is the Salt Lake County DA's office really having to look at the worst law schools in the country to recruit? Is there something else there? Like, did she already have connections to George Soros when Sim Gill hired her? And that's where she started her career in Salt Lake County. She originally lived in Michigan and then moved out here. So I think, with more digging on this, you could probably find some interesting stuff. She's also running a PAC now. Where's the money? Who's donating to that PAC? And what favors are they getting from her in exchange for donating to that? We should be asking these questions. And what we can start to do is, again, laying the foundation. Because if we're laying the foundation in 2025 into 2026, making people realize, like, this person is not a good clerk. She's doing a bad job. She was a horrible deputy clerk. She's not smart at all. And in fact, I'll be honest with you. This kind of gets to my whole thing about DEI. The biggest beneficiaries of DEI are liberal white women. The clerk is an example of that. If a minority male like me went to one of the worst law schools in the country like that, you would not hire me. Nobody would. But you're a liberal white woman. You went to one of the worst law schools in the country, and people are like, "Oh, you're very talented." I'm not seeing it. Not smart. So the point being is that we can lay the groundwork for that so that the issue can be used against her in 2026. Maybe there's something to that story. There's something weird there, but we need people to put the effort in and dig into it. Our press isn't going to do it. They won't even ask her about the George Soros donations. So we have to do it ourselves. Now, once again, let me just say, you're listening to the Goud Crowd. I have to remember to do this so you know what you're listening to. I'm Goud. I'm the host. If you want to call in, you can call my cell phone. Don't be shy to call either. 385-237-7960. As I said, my phone number is pretty public, so you're not actually getting private information from me. And that's because my producer isn't here today. I guess, as I said, I'm in San Diego right now, so it is beautiful out. I mean, like totally beautiful. It was like probably in the 80s today, sunny. I see a beautiful sunset. And I don't know what it's like out in, I don't know, it's like in Utah, but I think I read it was snowing. So he had to drive somewhere, and today he can drive today before the snow starts. So he took off. We hope he has a wonderful Thanksgiving. So Mr. Producer, I hope you enjoy your Thanksgiving. Okay, so that's the messaging piece of this, right? What you want, again, is people are going to be good with engaging with the so like, okay, sorry, let's step back. You want the committees to find the information. And because part of also what's happening is a lot of Democrats are running like the Republicans, right? I gave you the example of Suzanne Harrison yesterday. I mean, when I say she is left-wing, she is completely left-wing and loony. But her whole campaign, when I saw her talk, was, I'm a doctor and I like to help people. That's literally how she would start her speeches. It was lame and boring, but people thought she was moderate. Oh, she's moderate. Everything is, she's moderate. And I'll just tell you, one of the secrets of Suzanne Harrison that most people don't realize is she doesn't actually do a lot of work as a candidate. So she'll show up at events and you'll literally see her run around, take pictures, and then leave within 2 minutes. So there's no actual real interaction with people. Just quickly, she'll take a photo and then she'll take off. And then she'll post the photo like she was at the event the whole time and really doing, engaging with the public and whatnot. I doubt most people have ever engaged with her. And then I'll tell you on top of that, if you want to talk about someone that is really unpleasant, go and try to engage with her on policy. She is just really nasty when she doesn't agree with you. Candace and I went to talk to her about this issue of getting men. D. Theodore had proposed this ordinance to ban men from women's locker rooms. When we went and met with Suzanne Harrison, first of all, she was evasive. She wouldn't answer the question directly. No matter how many ways or times we asked her, do you support this ordinance, or do you support just generally men using women's locker rooms? She would not answer the question because she supports it. And in fact, she took her daughter to the Equality Utah's Allies dinner because she supports that organization and their policies, which includes letting men go into women's locker rooms. So she's getting away with that, though, because we don't have counter messaging against it. And we need to start doing that because she's not the only one with this false veneer of being moderate. Jenny Wilson is another one. The one example is her support of allowing men into women's locker rooms. But another one is that she also has massively increased the budget. She runs like she's a moderate on financial issues, but then you look at the Salt Lake County budget and it's more than doubled in a very short period of time, even though the number of constituents that they directly serve has massively dropped. I think it's at less than 10,000 people now. So why are you spending $2 billion when your actual constituents are less than 10,000 people? And they're doing all of these extra things that, maybe we like it, maybe we don't, I don't know. They've got, aging services, which I guess, I think I saw a county I went to a meeting once and I was surprised because, I have old parents and we don't really I wouldn't think to call the government to help with my parents if I had an issue. I would just kind of work with my sister and we figure it out. But there was a county council member talking about how much aging services helped with his mom. And, people, I guess, want all these services to be provided by the government. So there is some of that going on. But I think there's also services that I'm not sure that we need. There's duplicate services where the county is doing things that are already being done by a different government agency. There was an issue a couple of years ago where they gave money to the Utah AIDS Foundation. So taxpayer money given to the Utah AIDS Foundation to open a clinic under the guise of there was discrimination against gays, or I guess not just gays, but LGBTQIA++ minus Z whatever, who face discrimination allegedly when they go to get medical care, I guess, and including at the Salt Lake County Health Department. I emailed them and asked them, well, what studies do you have showing this? Because it's weird to me that you're having, if there's really discrimination, right? What evidence do you have of it? And then also, what services are they providing that are already being provided? What services will they provide in this new clinic that are already being provided by the Salt Lake County Health Department? Because we don't want duplicate services going on. I couldn't get an answer. Their answer was to say I was bigoted for even asking the questions. That's from our some members of our county council. So that's kind of why you need to be, though, laying the foundation for this stuff, is that these, it would be hard for Aaron Ryder, for example, to come in, go through the whole convention process. So that would have been April, and then start laying the groundwork against Jenny Wilson if no groundwork has been laid before. Because the reality is, again, she's left wing. But she sells herself as this very moderate woman, maybe a little bit to the center left, and she's not center left. I mean, I don't even know if that's center left. I'd hate to see what left wing is. But we didn't lay the foundation so that Erin could then take that foundation and build on it for her own campaign. So maybe like some of this, the result is it's not fair to our candidates. And now, so you have this, let's say you have this committee, right? It's getting the information. It's constantly, we're like putting information out there, communicating with voters about it. What you want then is a party chair, though, who is willing to then go and communicate with the press. And this actually takes a lot of effort. So, for example, you want a party chair who is going to call the press up, because sometimes when you're doing stories, you will be calling, like, you should have relationships with journalists, and because so that you can call them if you have something, and that they can contact you and feel free to if they have an issue. So there are, in my case, there are journalists who will contact me who I have a relationship with if they hear about something about me, or they want to ask me a question, or if I have something, I will call them up because I think, okay, I like this person. Let me call them up, see if they're interested in this information I've gathered. And you need to build those stories, because what you find is that, I'm not saying that, just so it's clear, when I say this, I'm not saying journalists are lazy. I'm just saying that the more information that you give them and the better you develop the story, the more likely it is that they'll be willing to cover it. And the easier it is for them to cover, because you've given them the information and they can go and do their own due diligence with it. So you want a party chair who's having those regular conversations with the press in the background. On top of that, you want a party chair who is out there going on to various shows, right? So, for example, there's that show, the Hinckley Report, right, on Sundays. It's a pretty boring show overall because it's the same cast of characters, but as a party chair needs to be on that show because our glitterati or the elites in Salt Lake County, that's how they start their Sundays off. They watch the Hinckley Report. It's all exciting for them. And you need to be able to communicate with them and kind of help set kind of the messaging going into the week with the press, because the press is going to watch that show. You want to be able to go on to other shows as well, right? There are different news shows. You want to go on a regular news show. You want to go onto the radio shows. There's Radio from Hell. That's an example. It's a total left-wing radio show. And I think I talked about this last time. Like, they have BLM flags, they have trans flags when you walk in, all sorts of stuff. But to be fair to them, they're tough. They are tough interviewers. And we want a party chair who will go on to shows like that, because that's a great way to outreach to the other side. And it's good practice, right? Because if you go and talk to, well, I was going to say the conservative press. I don't know what that even looks like here. If you go and talk to maybe a more fair journalist, their questions will be more fair and they're easier to answer. But if you go on to Radio from Hell or these left-wing shows, they'll totally attack you. And it's a good skill to learn how to respond to that. So that's what you want on the first piece of this. I would say you also want your leadership to be writing regular op-eds in the newspapers. That's kind of, free media, touching on the issues of the day, or maybe the issues that are upcoming. So as you're kind of laying the groundwork, on an issue. Let's give the example. Let's say there are these men being allowed into women's prisons. Again, just to be clear, men who are pretending to be women going into the women's prisons because the sheriff has allowed them to. Yeah, you find that out that it's true. Then you go and you write an op-ed about it, saying, this is what we found. Our legislature needs to change the law because just as a little bit of background, last year they passed that bill allowing men to go into women's prisons as long as they meet, whatever these various standards. I can't think of a better word for that. Various, you know what I'm saying. Anyway, they have to meet certain standards to be able to go into the women's prison. They passed it last year because they were afraid of a lawsuit from Biden's DOJ. Now, I have sent an email or a text message to the sponsor to see if she'd be willing to revisit that law and now to just do a categorical ban on men going into women's prisons. Because if there's a man who has mental health problems and wants to pretend that he's a woman, he can just be segregated off into a different section of the men's prison. There's no reason to ever put him into the women's prison, right? But let's say you discover this is going on, then you would write an op-ed, you'd go through the history of the bill and maybe push look, we as a party want to see this changed. We're fighting for women. You've now kind of set yourself up like, oh, here's a good issue. We've set the foundation, it's out there, and you have regular op-eds on various issues as they come up. Because part of what the party chair should be doing is being ahead of the issues. Defining what the issues are at all, maybe identifying the issues, defining them, and making people see what the solutions are and why the Republican Party is the better brand to be able to deal with them. So that's your second piece on this media part. The third one is this. I think there would be value in having a party chair who does monthly press conferences. Right now, the only real regular press conferences I can think of are coming from the governor's office. And it's a pretty limited number of journalists that are in there. I want to say that there might be 8 journalists that are there in person, and then typically maybe 2 that are online. There's a guy down in Washington County, and I've also seen one out in Summit County. I think that's the Park City Recorder. So maybe like 10 journalists total, but they're all these mainstream journalists. And the value of having a monthly press conference is, well, first of all, let me say this. One of the initiatives I like that's coming from President Trump is they've said they're going to credential alternative media. So podcasters, maybe people that are reporters on X and things like that, to be part of the White House Press Correspondents Association so they can go into those press conferences. I think that's fantastic. Because one of the things that I have found in my own life, and I think this is generally true, is that the reason why so many people are typically, most people who vote Democrat, you find that it has to do with the information environment that they are living in, and that it tends to be dominated by mainstream media. But when you open their eyes to how mainstream media is really just pushing narratives, and you move them off of that into more reliable forms of media, what you'll find is that people are like, oh, this makes sense, and they start to vote Republican. So we have to pierce through that with people that are still stuck in that bubble. And in Utah, one of the problems we have is we have alternative media sources, but they need to have more publicity out there. And it's hard to break through because, you have Deseret News, KSL, Salt Lake Tribune, and then whatever the TV stations are as kind of your mainstream media. But you have a bunch of podcasts like, We Are the People is one, Political Head Trauma. There's like the Liberty Moms. Oh, there's the Goud Crowd. So you want these alternative media sites to get more publicity, so that so more people start turning to them. And it doesn't have, hopefully it becomes your primary source of information, but it doesn't have to be. It's helpful though to have people start listening to this stuff as well as whatever they listen to or read, because it'll give them new perspectives and hopefully help break through that mainstream media bubble. A monthly press conference right now the governor has one, and it would be great if he would do that, because he is our equivalent of President Trump at the local level. The problem is, like I said, there's like 10 journalists that regularly are in that monthly press conference. I just don't see Governor Cox inviting in alternative media. I think he gets a lot of positive press coverage from our mainstream media, and is reluctant to try to expand expand into have other media come in there, because he knows that the conservative media, and maybe this is a criticism of people like me, is that we won't be as friendly to him. But I don't think that's our job. I think, if you get a tough question from someone like me or someone like Jason Preston, you should be able to answer it without losing your temper or coming off as kind of prickly or annoyed that you got the question. That's a skill set, though, that you only learn if you're doing it on a regular basis. And I don't get the sense that he actually takes a lot of tough questions. And so I think he is not going to be the one that's going to bring in the kind of alternative press into those press conferences. A party chair, though, could have monthly press conferences and start to bring in the alternative press, right? Because what you'll find, and this is the one kind of pitfall I see here, is that there is no guarantee that your mainstream media will show up to these press conferences. Does that make sense? Because it is possible that it is possible, and the reason is this: they're not going to want to give publicity to the alternative press that's there. That's one. Number two is, some of them, not all of them, just to be fair about this, some of them are pretty left-wing, and so they're there to help promote the establishment and Democrats. And so they're not going to show up to like the Salt Lake County GOP chair or the Utah Republican Party chair doing a press conference, right? But the way you still do it, you have all the media that will show up, which I think you could get all your alternative media to show up, and you start pushing information out that's useful. So let's say that I have a story that a committee has developed. I'm just using I'm just using myself as an example, whatever it is. Let's say I'm the party chair. The committee has come to me with some great information, juicy story. And so we're having a press conference. I get out there, I do the press conference, and we release the story. It goes through alternative media sites. So let's say Political Head Trauma reports it on their show on Friday. Well, now it's out there, right? And now maybe the press picks up on it, and now you got yourself a story. Do you see how that could work? Like, the press conference can be very powerful. And then if you have any stories start to move like that, where it's broken by an alternative press site and then moves into the mainstream media, you will have those mainstream media people start showing up to the press conferences. Trust me, people want to listen to the people who are actually breaking the stories, so they will show up. It just might take a little bit of time, but you can still use it to at least start to give more publicity to these alternative sites. Now, another piece of this messaging, so we're still talking about messaging. Another piece of messaging, I think, is to have regular events where you can start engaging voters. One thing I have noticed is that there is a hunger in Utah. And I'll just say this. I'm pretty Salt Lake County based, so I've seen this mostly in Salt Lake County, but there's a real hunger for conversations and debates about issues. I will say I have learned that people in Utah seem like they're uncomfortable with the idea of debating. Some of them think it's very contentious. This is what I was told. I ran for the House District seat earlier this year, and I challenged my opponent to debates. And the response was interesting, because when I would talk to people, they were interested in it. And then they thought it was very like a negative thing to have a debate because it was contentious. And I don't fully understand that. That I think is a cultural gap that I don't fully understand, like in that running for office position, how you would kind of overcome that. Because I just think if you're going to run for office, you should be able to debate, because you're going to have to debate if you're going to be effective. Because, the reality is that we have a Utah legislature that's has a Republican supermajority. But what I find is that they're not very, they compromise with the left, which I think is weird. They don't need a single vote of a Democrat to pass any bill. And every single bill that they try to pass, they compromise with Democrats. So, we got the HB 257. It restricts men from women's locker rooms. We could not get a categorical ban on men going into women's locker rooms. We got a compromise bill because Republicans were working with Democrats. And it's very strange to me that that's what happens. But I think a lot of it is because the Republicans are completely incapable of actually defending the issue, or, as I was talking about earlier, they have no swagger. So we should be having more debates. And here's the other thing is, like, so there was a debate during the initial, I think it was before the convention, between Rochelle Morris and Mike Carey. I want to say that there were probably almost 200 people at that debate. It was awesome. And it wasn't contentious at all. So for those of you who think these things are contentious, they debated. And it was a very policy-oriented debate. It was really interesting. And it's clear that people enjoyed it. Then there's been I saw another debate. It was a couple weeks ago between Phil Lyman and Chris Harding, the Salt Lake County auditor. Again, I thought that was a really informative debate. And there were probably maybe 75 people there, 7,500 people. And then I went to another event on Friday night. So Friday night, when you could be doing all sorts of fun things. You could go out to a restaurant. You could, if you drink, you could go out drinking. If you like to dance, you could go out dancing. You could go watch a movie. You could spend time with your family. There were 100 people in this place called Chubby's, which is a sports bar, listening to Aaron Davidson, Phil Lyman, and Natalie Clausen talk about election issues. 100 people, easily. And so it shows you there's a hunger for this. I just think the Friday night thing, to me, I mean, if you're willing to sacrifice your Friday night to talk about politics, I mean, obviously, like, I'll do that. But if you're a normal person, you're willing to show up for that, that shows that there's a real hunger for it. So that shows you we need more of this. So I think that the Salt Lake County GOP could have a lot more debates on issues, just regular debates. And I think it would cause people to be willing to talk about issues. And you should have it open to the public and have them come up and ask questions. Like, what a great opportunity to engage with the public, to talk about the most controversial issues. And some won't be, but just controversial issues, and let people engage with you, hear their ideas. People have fantastic ideas on stuff. Be able to respond to it. You can use it to train people that want to run for office, because that's part of the skill you have to learn, is how do you deal with people that ask you hard questions, right? And do it in a way that's not unpleasant, because, when people get unpleasant, that just ruins it. And even actually, I'll say, one of the things I talk to people about is that as a party, we tend to be a little bit, sometimes we can be a little bit like morose, right? Because it's so, I mean, I'm feeling a little bit differently right now because, Trump won. I feel like it's hopeful. Things have the potential to get a lot better. I think Trump could be a really significant president that actually changes the trajectory of the country. But before that, it was feeling a little bit like, oh, well, if we don't win this is a disaster. I don't think we'd survive another 4 years of the Democrats. I mean, just to be like, if they let in 20 million people illegally in 4 years, they've now perfected their whole human trafficking operation. It's all government funded. What's the next 4 years look like? They'll probably bring in 100 million people. And I don't think people understood that. A country can't survive that kind of influx of foreigners. It just doesn't work. So, but the point being is that we need to be out there engaging on all these issues and talking to people, and then also not being so hopeless about the future, because people do want to hear. I don't think it's necessary that you have to be fake positive, right? If something is not positive, you shouldn't lie about it or try to spin it. But we have to be joyful warriors, and also add as much comedy in it as you can, right? Because people do like to laugh a little bit. I feel like some of the best things when I've spoken to a crowd, is like when you make a joke, that's the thing they remember. They don't even remember anything else you said. I'll give you an example. My dad, when I campaigned for county clerk, he would He was very popular on the campaign trail. So that's kind of interesting. The ladies really liked him. And I remember he would introduce himself as, "This is Goud, and I am the Goud father." It was kind of one of the best dad jokes I think he's ever told. And I remember telling it once to a crowd of people, and they just could not stop laughing. And afterwards, that's the main thing that people talk to me about. They just love the joke. So, this makes you memorable, right? Because humor, people like to laugh. They want to be able to enjoy stuff. And even honestly, the most negative situations, there's typically some humor in it. So we got to kind of learn how to be funnier. The other thing I would say is this. So we want to have more debates. I think we need to have more events on our college campuses. I mean, here in Salt Lake County, we have the University of Utah. I think there's like a women's college, the Westminster, that's up in Salt Lake City. We have the SLIC, so Salt Lake County Community Colleges. We should be going there and having regular events. And I think at least the University of Utah has a College Republicans chapter. We need to go there and develop relationships with them, and hold events. Be willing to go there, talk about issues, whatever those issues are. Have these things like you see them with Charlie Kirk or Matt Walsh, these kind of bigger names. They do national tours and go and talk on college campuses and take their questions, and and there'll be challenging questions. We want to do that in our own campuses to get people excited. I think that there's a sea change happening in terms of younger people understanding a little bit better why this matters to them. I'll tell you, it's kind of sad to me because when I was in college, I really didn't care that much about. I used to write this op. I used to write an op-ed in college. I got actually protested when I was in undergrad. Like hundreds of people showed up to protest me because I wrote this op-ed piece. I could talk about this some other time, but the point is, you want to have this like engagement. Oh, actually, my point was this. I wish college kids did not have to be involved in politics. Okay, like I wish you could just enjoy your young years and be carefree, figure out what you want to do with your life in college, be able to do what, get drunk and make a mistake, whatever, all this stuff that you used to be able to do. I just feel like you can't do it anymore. The reality is that we have made so many bad decisions that we probably made it very difficult for you to be able to, start a life and have the same quality of life that your parents had. And I think my generation, so I'm Gen X, we're partly to blame for this, as are the older generations who are the parents of these kids. So we owe it to them to make the right decisions. But that means that they also have to get involved, because your parents have clearly shown that they're not capable of making the right decisions for you. So it makes me sad in some ways, but maybe it's a good thing, because if it turns out that we're able to get these people engaged at a younger age, we can kind of prevent these problems from happening in the future and maybe change the culture. Because I think part of the reason why Democrats have been so successful is that we as Republicans have lost the culture war generally. It's kind of coming back. I'll be honest with you. I think the Trump factor is huge because he is a little bit of a cultural phenomenon, right? You see like football players and soccer players doing the Trump dance. You see people beginning to kind of laugh more and enjoy Trump as kind of a character. Well, we need some of that at the local level too. Tell me, is there anybody here that you look at and think is memorable, that you laugh at all, that you think is funny? I have trouble finding it, because a lot of the people that I go to speeches or whatever, they're not particularly funny. They're not particularly as maybe carefree. It's kind of like you want to give off, or confidence kind of humor, this type of stuff. Okay, so that's kind of our messaging block here. The next piece is, and I think this is where we're missing, is ground game. So we talked a little bit earlier, I think, about all the stuff that the Utah Democratic Party did. So let me share this. Before we do this, let me just say again, if you want to call in, you can call my personal number, because my producer ditched me today. Now, to be fair, he's driving up to he is driving up to where he's going for Thanksgiving, which would be all in the snow. And so, he's got to beat the storms. Like I said, I'm down in sunny San Diego. There's not a snowflake to be seen anywhere. It was like 80 degrees out. It's beautiful, perfect weather. I'm wearing this. I look ridiculous in San Diego because nobody has a coat on. And, so I was like, oh, I wasn't paying attention. So anyway, he's not here this week. But if you want to call in, call my personal cell phone number, 385-237-7960. Give me 1 second. I had someone text me, so let me just say, yes, you can call it. And I'm happy to take your comments. So let me just say again on this ground game issue, let me share my screen one more time so we can see what the Democrat Party did. Because whatever you think of the Democrats, they are very good at ground game, right? So again, check this out, right? They reached out to over 250,000 voters since May 1st of 2024. That's huge. 60,000 conversations. They did phone banking, texting, door knocking, persuading undecided voters and getting Democrat voters out to the polls. They have a large coalition of partners. We kind of talked about this earlier. And then they provided free resources, campaign coaching, including campaign coaching, strategy consultation, data administration. There's so much stuff that the Democratic Party has done for their candidates. And but a lot of this has to do with the ground game. What kind of, and I can tell you this as someone who ran, is, and we don't really have, as the Republican Party, at least in 22, we didn't have ground game, right? I will say I got a lot of feedback after the last show from some candidates who contacted me. And what I heard is that didn't really change for 2024. The same thing happened. The candidates were given donations from the county party, which is good. It's helpful. But they weren't provided those different services, email services, text messages, door knocking, this kind of, and I will say this, door knocking would not be a service in that it's not paid. But what you need is coordination so you can get the volunteers to go to the right places, right? Because I would say that you probably don't want to spend a lot of time knocking on Democrat doors. It's very hard to switch somebody from a Democrat to vote for a Republican. You probably want to spend more of your time during the summer on swing voters. So hit swing voters in that summertime. But then once ballots drop or you get close, you want to actually be going for low propensity Republican voters. That's your highest likelihood of if you get them to vote, you'll actually be adding numbers to what's already there. Because I think what we're finding, if you kind of look at these races, we're getting in the mid 40s pretty much Republicans generally, especially at the countywide level. So it's about a 55-45 split. Some races fall below that, some above it, but really that's your general split. So the question is, how do you build from that split into the getting yourselves to 50+1? I would say you focus more on swing voters, right? And your low propensity Republican voters. Democrat, if you can switch a Democrat, that's great, but it's going to take a lot more effort to do that than to work on those other two. So now on the ground game, there's a few pieces to this. So first, I would say voter registration. And I know with Scott Pressler's efforts in Pennsylvania, there's been a lot of focus on this, right? Because he has taken counties and flipped them from Democrat majority to Republican majority. I was actually in one of those counties to poll watch on election night. I went to Luzerne County, Pennsylvania, and I met a bunch of local activists there who had worked with Scott Pressler to flip their area to a majority Republican voter registration county. Now, here's the difference: is Salt Lake County already has more registered Republicans than Democrats. So that's not actually the issue. But I think what Salt Lake County probably has a lot more of than places in Pennsylvania is people who are registered as Republicans but are actually Democrats. And they'll tell you, you'll see this on X all the time. I am a registered Republican. as a registered Republican, here's what I think. And when they say that, that is a red flag that that person is not actually conservative. That's just someone who's using the party because they want to be influenced, like primaries, right? So they want to influence the Senate primary, the House primary, things like that. And so that's what you kind of have to be aware of. I think Salt Lake County is a little bit different. So I would say maybe what we wanted to spend more time doing is making sure that groups that are more likely to vote Republican are actually registered to vote. So truck drivers, hunters, fishers, factory workers. I think I mentioned last time my next door neighbor, I know he and at least one of his kids works in a factory. Are they registered to vote? This is on me. I will, next time I talk to him, I will find out if he's registered to vote. Miners, we have mines here, right? Cops, firefighters, military members. Your military members, I think there's a little bit of a split sometimes between officers and enlisted. Enlisted tend to vote more Republican, majority or more Republican, while officers sometimes tend to go majority Democrat. I suspect this election that probably flipped, but you still want to aim at those military members, gun owners, veterans, right? These are kind of the big constituent groups. There might be other ones too. So, if you have other ones that you can think of, I would love to hear it. You can feel free to comment or call in. Call in again. If you want to call in, it's 385-237-7960. The way you would get to be able to register these voters is, I think, but first of all, you put out a message to people saying, hey, if these people are in your neighborhood, can you go knock on their doors and make sure that they're registered to vote? Like I just said, I know my neighbor works at a factory. It's on me. I should go and ask him, and I will. Like, are you guys registered? Is everyone in this house registered to vote? Can we make sure that you are? Let me help you. I think there's a cop in my neighborhood too. So I go ask him, hey, are you registered to vote? Let's make sure you're registered to vote. I just want to, I'm not going to tell you how to vote, but I do want to make sure that you're getting your ballot, because that's like half the battle, right? If they get the ballot, then we can work on getting them to turn it in. But we need them to have the ballot to begin with. I think, though, the primary way you target these people is you go to events where they're more likely to be. So, for example, you go to gun shows. There's a big semi-truck show. I went to it in 22 that was in Lehigh. I think it might be an annual event. You go to that truck show. When the auto show comes to town, you go to the auto show. It's more, I would think it would be a more male crowd at the auto show, probably more Republican. Go make sure people register to vote outside. When we're registering people to vote as well, we want to encourage them to register as Republicans and talk to them about issues. This is great practice for our grassroots to start engaging, and a lot of them do it anyway, but the more you do it, the better you get at it. You want to engage with people, talk about issues. If there's some issue that people bring up that you didn't hear about before, you can send that up to the party chair, right? Hey, someone brought up down in Bluffdale, they're trying to increase their taxes. They're opposed to it. The party chair can find out more about it, or that committee I told you about can find out more about it and start to develop stories, figure out what position the party should take. There could be all sorts of issues going on that we can start engaging in that could get feedback from those events. But we should be at all these events, every single event. This is like low-hanging fruit, is to get these people registered, to get them excited, and we'll now start to increase the numbers of conservatives, maybe that's a better way to say it, that are registering as Republicans and that will vote. And then we want to make sure that our Republican strongholds, right? With this type of an effort, we want to focus on those Republican strongholds. So in Salt Lake County, we want to make sure we're focused on, Riverton. So the southwest part of the county, for example, is heavily Republican. So Riverton, Bluffdale, Harriman, we should have a real focus on those areas, making sure that everyone that we think is Republican is registered to vote, because that's the area that you can kind of exploit. And I don't mean exploit in a bad way, but meaning that is your area where you're going to extract a lot of Republican votes to counter Salt Lake City, the avenues and, the benches where all the rich white liberals live, who they'll be very hard to turn Republican. So you need to counter that with Republican voters in more conservative parts of the county. You would do, I think, door knocking in swing areas of the county during the summer. So as you're heading into election season, post your after your conventions happen April, at mid to late April, I think is when those all start to happen, especially Salt Lake County because it's your biggest county, and then your state convention. Then for some of the races will go into a primary in June. So once that primary is done, I think you start to send out your ground game, door knocking. You need to have flyers ready for people so they can take flyers to people's homes, right? And then start talking about issues and candidates. And you target your swing areas, your swing voters. Even these, and these should have like your key races. And I'll tell you another piece of this that I don't think people realize is a lot of times the candidates will not coordinate with each other because they're afraid of, if there's something negative about a candidate, how that might impact them, right? So like in 2022, sorry, I need a drink of water. Talking this long is very hard. I wish my producer was here. But anyway, in 2022, I was, oh, just give me 1 second, hold on. Okay. In 2022, I'm one of the 3 people that, or I guess there are 4 marquee races, right? At-large county council seat, district attorney, clerk, sheriff. So I was one of the people running. I was running for the clerk position. And what happened is that, think about it, right? They found my old social media post, they blew it up. It's horrible. Goud is a threat to democracy. Let me just say it, like, super offensive to say that, right? Because I actually I'm a veteran. I actually served the country. So the idea that I'm a threat to democracy while, my opponent who has never served the country in any way, capacity, or form is somehow not, is just totally ridiculous. But putting that aside, point being, if you're one of the other people running in that race as a Republican, you might be nervous about associating with me then, right? Because it's like, oh, this guy has become controversial. Do I want to envelop myself into his controversy? Because what they would do is then they'd put out, their advertising was all like, Goud is an extremist. And then so are all the other candidates running, and they're just like Goud, right? So you can understand sometimes there's some hesitancy of the candidates to coordinate because they're afraid like issues could pop up that will damage them. But the reality is this. The left will always associate you together to try to take the whole ticket down. So at that point, I think it's better for candidates to all just coordinate and work together and to go through and win these races. Because I'll tell you this, even when that story hit, despite the massive press coverage, a lot of people hadn't even heard about it, or they didn't care because it was in the Trib. That's how silly it is. Now, I'll say this. Door knock. So what I think is initially after your primary, you would go and door knock in swing areas, and the candidates could coordinate. You could have flyers. These people can, and the goal would be to go and have those conversations that the Democrats were talking about, right? You want to be able to talk to voters, be like, hey, so and so is running for sheriff. I don't know if you know this, but the sheriff is. Ooh, I got a call. Hold on. Okay. Give me 1 second. Hey Tracy, how are you? All right, I'm gonna have to put you on with my speaker, so I'll let you make your comment. Okay.
I don't know what's the comment or what's the topic.
Oh, we're talking about how to improve or what the Salt Lake County GOP should do going forward to win races. Do you have a comment on that? Okay, ready?
Yeah.
Everyone can hear me talking to you, so. All right, hold on, guys. Here we go. Go ahead, Tracy.
All right, so they should meet more often and do training for what a delegate is supposed to do, because most people don't understand. And as Chris Knoll said on the stage, that he doesn't even know who to call to get out the vote, which is the weirdest question, because that is what your delegate system is for. They're supposed to go tell their neighbors of who the party nominee is. But if you're trying to control the election, I guess, you probably wouldn't use the delegate system. So I honestly think the Republican Party, the system, is a very good system. It's actually kind of brilliant, but it's just not being used right in Salt Lake County. That people don't know what to do. The information, they hide it. And going forward, I think that needs to be more open to the delegates so they can call each other when they have questions, or they can get the people meeting and understanding what the issues are going on. So I think that's how you win it, is you actually use the delegate system that the Republican Party created and put in place.
Oh, that's actually perfect timing for your comment. I was just talking about ground game and how our party needs to improve its ground game. Because to your point, the Democrat Party put out a press release saying that they did over 60,000 conversations. Wait, hold on, I'm sorry. They had reached out to over 250,000 voters since May 1st of 2024. They had over 60,000 conversations with people. And to your point, we actually have this very dedicated base of people who are delegates. I found this when I ran in 2022 that my volunteers actually came out of the convention. They like you as a candidate, and then they start volunteering for you. So I think that's actually a great point. Now, you think that we're not, like, what, I guess, do you just think that the party is not using them enough as they go forward?
I don't think they're using them at all. I don't think they're being instructed to even know what to do. So I think some people think, oh, I just go to the convention, and I elect the person, that's it. They don't understand that, no, once you get a nominee, you're supposed to go back and tell your neighborhoods of, hey, this is who we elected and this is why, and then do those meetings and get those meetings set up for the actual candidates and stuff. But we don't use that system. Half the time, I don't even get emails. I do think their texting system has improved that, because I have been getting texts, but they just send them out late. Like, I would have never really known about the Central Committee this past few weeks ago, except somebody reached out to me and told me to go. So I feel like that needs to be more used as a system, meet more, like have your precinct chairs tell your delegates, hey, let's meet like once a quarter even, or once a month, and talk about the issues that's going forward. Because once you're done electing, you're still supposed to stand guard and watch and make sure that candidate who is now elected. So once they become elected, to me, they're not part of the party. You're supposed to stand guard and watch to make sure that they are actually doing the job that they said they would do. And then they're not passing laws that are violating your constitutional rights. So for the next time, hey guys, we need to get someone else in there, because this person is not actually doing what they said that they would do, and they're actually violating the constitutional right. So to me, there's a lot more that a delegate is and can be utilized. It's just, unfortunately, we don't have the system in there to teach people.
Okay, so training, that I could see that for sure. I mean, I can see how. Well, I mean, we need to figure out how we want to use our delegates, and then train them better so that they understand how they can be useful. I actually got a comment that I was going to show today where somebody said, I want to be more involved with the Utah GOP, but I don't know where to even begin. I would love some advice. And then she said, make Utah great again. So to your point, though, I mean, here's someone that wants to be more involved. I don't know if she's a delegate or not, but
I had somebody reach out to me when I went to that meeting, and we exchanged numbers, and I've got to reach back out to her. But she said, I need to get involved more. This isn't working like it's supposed to. And I said, I know, but we don't have a training part in these elections. We just don't, plus not everybody has enough time to watch. Like, so my Senate district, when they would they're electing Senate chairs, I watched the process, and Dan McKay is actually my representative, who is automatically, I guess, a precinct chair, which that's got to change. Once an elected official, separation of powers is very important in order for a Republican form of government to work. You have to have separation of powers. And once the person's elected, they should not be part of the party, because you've got to stand guard and do your checks and balances. It's got to be separation. But I watched this Senate district guy get reelected again, and I watched the Senate district guy, his actions in this past year, that he shouldn't be elected again. He's not one that would be great for the party. Actually works in opposition, but he did get elected again because nobody knows him. Like, everybody thinks he's doing an okay job, training. And so these people want to do something more. That would be their training. Say, okay, let's do something more. You're going to watch the actions of those that are representing you. And if they are doing things that are right with their party platform, or if they're not, and then hey, next time we need to remove this person. Their actions did not represent our party platform, or their actions, or they're running policies that don't represent our party platforms. So it's hard, but there should be a training for people, is what I think. And that would improve your party process huge. And then you'd have calamity too. People would feel like they're adding something, they're adding value. Instead, it's just go to one convention and that's it. That's what they think their job is. And sadly, the chair doesn't even know what get out the vote means. He doesn't know who to call. And that's your delegates.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for your comment. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Bye.
Okay. Bye.
Okay, if anybody else wants to call in again, feel free to call in. You'll get to see the full sausage being made here. So it's 385-237-7960. I will call screen live on air. How fun is that? Okay, we do have a few comments on the side here that I just saw. One, Danny Insight said men do not belong in women's restrooms or locker rooms. I agree. I wish everybody agreed on that topic, but they do not. Someone named Percival, I guess, commented saying, "What is this? This is the Goud Crowd radio show. So thanks for listening." You have a little pot symbol in your thing. That's, I won't judge you for that. And then Nancy H says, "Are any other states as open to opposite party primary voters? D's registering and voting R to sway the primary results." I would say, I think there's not a real way to police that, because if you think about it, if somebody registers as a Republican, I have no way to check on that. And in fact, in some states, the primaries are actually completely open, so you can vote in either primary. We actually make it so you have to register as a Republican by a particular date. And I'll just be honest with you, I don't tend to focus so much on the Democrats who register as Republicans. I think they're there. We should be aware of that and understand it. But our goal should be to pump up more people that are likely to vote for us. So like I was saying, your truck drivers, your factory workers, your military members, we really need to get 100% of those people registered, because we'll get a much higher percentage of those people's votes. And that effort will be more measurable and will be better for us than trying to clean out these people who are actually Democrats registering as Republicans. I'll just say that if you see somebody say something and like they put out some liberal position. So for example, we should have, there should be no restrictions on abortion. It is a decision between a woman and her doctor, right? So, and the person will say, "I'm a registered Republican and I believe there should be no restrictions on abortion." That should be a ding, 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 red flag. That's a Democrat, right? When they say that I'm a registered Republican, I've seen them do this a ton of times. They're typically not Republicans. It's just fake. So that's that. On ground game. So like I was saying, we want to start in these swing areas, right? Go through there and talk to swing voters initially during the summer. Then once your ballots drop, you need to switch into ballot chasing. So this election, I actually got to go down to Arizona and spend a few days ballot chasing with Turning Point Action for Trump and Kerry Lake. And I will say it was it was a really great experience. And it's really interesting because Arizona does not have a 100% mail voter system, but anyone can opt to get a mail ballot when they register to vote, and they'll constantly get it. So something like 75% of voters in Arizona get mail ballots. And so what you're trying to do in your ballot chasing is going to your low propensity Republican voters and making sure that they turn in their ballots, because those are the more difficult people to get. With your high propensity voters, so like I'm a high propensity voter, I vote every election. You shouldn't really have to put much effort into it. You want to encourage them to vote earlier, so you're not spending time on them, right? Because once the election starts, the clerk will put out a list of people who voted that you can purchase. And so if you can see if your high propensity voters are on that list, you don't have to spend time trying to go and get them. You want to get them voting early. But we don't have a ballot chasing operation really in Salt Lake County. We need to develop one though, and I would suggest that TP Action has an app. I believe it has information about more than one state, and it would be worth it for the next party chair to reach out to them and see if we could work with them and use their app in Salt Lake County as well, and try to use that to then again get out there and get as many voters to vote as possible. It's not ballot harvesting, because you want to make sure people understand the rules, right? Like, nobody should be touching someone else's ballot when they're doing this ballot chasing. The point is to get people, like sometimes it's as simple as you walk with that person out to the mailbox so that they make sure they get their ballot in. You make sure that they know where the drop boxes are if they're going to use a drop box, which I encourage people to do, because mail is not reliable. And it adds more hands touching your ballots than if you're just putting it into a ballot drop box. Ballot drop boxes are better, and that's what I would use. So that would be so we want to have a ballot chasing operation in place, and the way to do this is you'll get a new party chair. I think our party chair elections will be in March or April at the county convention. This could be set up so that your first test of it would be in municipal elections in the fall of 2025. They could then use that to test to make sure it's working, right? And that it's actually effective and measurable, and then make any improvements you need to make before the 2026 general election. So that's how I would look at that. Because our goal should be to get 100% of low propensity voters to vote. I think that actually made a difference in Arizona, because when I went down to the training, they said something like 200,000 Republican voters did not vote in the 2020 election. So getting those voters to vote is part of what made it so Trump won Arizona decisively. I think in Utah, we probably have a similar situation. Not Utah, I shouldn't say Utah, Salt Lake County. We probably have a similar situation where voters just they might be just disillusioned, right? We lose so much in Salt Lake County that if you're a Republican voter, you're just like, why bother? Are we going to win? No. And then you're just like, whatever, who cares? I'm not going to vote. But we have to make people understand your vote counts. It can make a huge difference. We are capable of winning countywide races, but we need to kind of improve our systems that are in place. The final piece, there's two final pieces of this. We have about 15 minutes left. So one is fundraising. I will say on this front, the county party has actually improved fundraising a lot. So to their credit, in 22, they raised $184,000, and in 24, they raised $280,000, right? That's pretty good. That's a huge increase in funding. Now, my counter to that is it didn't help win races, showing that there's still a problem. Like, so money is actually not, as is typically the case. Money doesn't actually solve all your problems. Like, if you're in an unhappy marriage, money's probably not going to solve your problem. Maybe it will, I don't know. If you're running an organization, money doesn't necessarily solve the problems if there are execution problems that are happening within the party. And I think here we have maybe vision and execution problems that is making it so the money isn't having the impact it could have if we had a better vision and execution. Now, the one thing I'll say here is that if you get new party leadership, what typically happens in these party leadership races, first of all, for those of you who don't know, your county delegates will be voting on a new chair, new vice chair, new secretary, new treasurer. Or keep the same, whatever it is. But you'll typically have kind of an establishment candidate run, and then you might have an insurgent candidate. One of the arguments that the establishment will use against the insurgent is that, look, they'll lose some donors. So I'll give you an example. Gail Miller, her company has given $30,000 in 2024 to the Salt Lake County GOP. I didn't see donations like that from her in the past, and so that's kind of newer. If you get a candidate to win that she doesn't like, she's unlikely to give money. But the counter is, again, what I said earlier, the money didn't help. And I think you can make up this money by, to Tracy's point earlier, engaging your delegates, right? You have, let's say you have delegates, you have precinct chairs, you'll have various precincts. If they all were giving some amount of monthly, they can easily make up for these types of shortfalls in any big donors that stop giving or halt. But what I'll say is this: let's say that happens, and then you lose your Gail Miller. She doesn't donate. Well, if you start winning, Gail Miller is going to come back, right? And any other of those types of donors, because everybody likes winners. And so that's the way to think about this stuff is we need to get the person that's got the vision, that understands the different legs you need for that stool, so that you can actually start winning elections, and then can execute. Fundraising is just one leg on that stool, and it's an important leg, but it doesn't overpower or isn't more important than those other legs, like your messaging leg, like I said, your ground game, and so like you need all of those legs to be strong. And then your final piece is that one thing I think the party could do better, this is what the Democrats talked about in theirs, is provide more services to candidates. And so what I mean by services is they could provide website services, right? Help candidates by paying for websites, help pay for design, help candidates with door knocking, so like an app so that we know where to send door knockers. Help candidates with an app that will do predictive dialing. And so this is, I don't know if you haven't used this before, they'll have an app, you log in, you pick a candidate, and then it'll start dialing people. You don't know where exactly, you don't know the person's phone number, but it'll dial the person, you can talk to them, you can fill out a little survey about what happened. And then that's another thing they could provide. So there are a lot of these different types of services that could be done at the county party level. And I think that could be more useful than giving the candidates money. So, like they gave, I think, the at-large candidates, so like your Rochelle Morris running for the county council at large, Aaron Ryder running for county mayor, were given this like $6,000 a piece. That's not a ton of money because they both actually raised a good amount of money. And so the $6,000 wouldn't really make a big dent. But if the party had held on to that and instead provided free services and in-kind donations to the candidates, it may have been more useful to them, right? Let's say you sent out door knocker. You printed out the door knockers, you used the app, you had the app developed, or used the TP Action app with some information about Salt Lake County, and you sent out door knockers all over Bluffdale, Riverton, Harriman, Sandy, just, in all your very Republican areas, just ballot chasing. And you were able to pump up the vote. You could have probably pushed Rochelle Morris, for example, over the limit. The Aaron Ryder county mayor race, she would have needed about 25,000 more votes is what would have changed that race either way. And so what you would want to do there, I think, is again target your Republican areas to make sure you've gotten the 100%, as close to that 100% of all your Republican voters in your most Republican areas to vote, right? But then you can also send them to other areas as well. I'm just saying the most efficient thing, like where I live, I think it was 70% Republican. It's pretty efficient to walk around neighborhoods like that and knock on doors and make sure people turn in their ballots. it will be less efficient to do that in Salt Lake County, where maybe 15% of the people are Republican. You're going to have to walk past a lot of Democrat houses before you get to the Republican one. So that would be another piece of this, is your these services. And I think when you put all of these things together, you can actually end up with a winning strategy going forward, and at least a real attempt to begin to dominate that information environment in Salt Lake County, because we got to pierce through this kind of left-wing media, begin to kind of get voters more engaged and more excited over a longer period of time, get more people volunteering. So Tracy's point is correct, that your delegates are they're really the heart of the party. They're the ones that do everything. They're the ones that are engaged. So how do you get them to spend their time volunteering for people? And on this, let me just take you, there was a comment. I had posted about this. I posted a video with the weekly rundown that I do about need for new leadership at the Salt Lake GOP. And so I got a bunch of comments on it. Let me share this one with you. So this Craig Ogan, I guess, he said, got to target neighborhoods and figure out how to win in the formerly Republican districts like east of 1300, east in Salt Lake City, and Murray, Cottonwood. Okay, so this, I kind of talked about this earlier. I don't know that you would start by trying to turn Democrat voters Republican. I actually feel like that's not worth the effort until you've gotten all your Republican voters to vote and you've talked to swing voters, right? Turning a Democrat Republican, the most effort, probably not worth the time. Now, the next thing is don't ignore municipal races. I 100% agree with this. I will say that I have talked to people in leadership and they view municipal races as being non-partisan. But they're not. They're officially nonpartisan. But everyone that's running is a Republican or a Democrat, and we as a Republican Party need to be engaged in those races. They're a good test for your ground game, for your messaging, right? Because you can be involved in these, and this is where you start developing your bench of future candidates. A lot of people that are in office at higher offices, they were in municipal offices to start, and so you want to develop a bench. And it's where you can test people. So, sometimes we get people into office and they turn out to not be what we thought they were going to be based on how they campaigned. And a lot of times that happens because they have no record. But if you have someone that was in a nonpartisan municipal position, you at least get to see how they would vote, and you'll get a better sense of that for when they start moving up the chain. Now, here's another one. This is the one I actually want to address here. Everyone, including you, stop pissing and moaning about quote unquote process grievances and rhinos. Okay. And then he says, invite more people into the tent, follow Trump's example, and talk issues in a way that doesn't exclude less than true believers. On this rhino issue and process grievances, I can kind of see this, but I think during a primary, if there's a process issue, people would obviously talk about it. So I don't have an issue with that. And in this case, there was a write-in campaign where the process was part of what was being brought up, right? Because the candidate, Phil Lyman, doing the write-in was saying, I'm running because they're not being transparent about the process used to put my opponent onto the primary ballot. So I think that's a little bit different. I will agree, though, that I don't think it's worth our time to generally be complaining about, I think, we have to fix another comment I saw actually was, we have to get our election system fixed. They stole all the down ballot races. Okay, well, then what do you do with that, right? That to me is the type of comment that is hopeless and it's not actually helpful. Do we need to do reforms to our election system? Yes, 100%. I agree with you. And in fact, I have pushed these over the years and we've gotten some improvements into our election system. Are we where we need to be? Absolutely not. Are there improvements that we need to make? 100% yes, and we will continue to work on that. And that, to that person, I think you should come and help with that. I think it'd be great. And so that's what I would say about that. Is like we want so process can sometimes be important. I just don't think we want to focus too much on it when it can be not helpful to our ultimate goal. the other piece is the rhino piece. And I think this is what people don't understand about the rhinos. And, you know, I'll be honest with you, like, I don't particularly think everyone that's elected into office is always going to disappoint you in some way, right? Like, I like Trump. I'm a big supporter. Has he disappointed me at times? 100%. That's just expected, right? that's the reality of the world. You know, no one's going to believe everything that I believe. So I would just say this. My bigger issue with someone who is a rhino is a lot of times they actually undermine the party and they work against candidates that are Republicans. And I you know, in 2022, I know for a fact that Amy Winder Newton helped my opponent. And maybe one day I'll get more into it, but she is, I believe, a Democrat. And so I think someone like that is actually dangerous to our party and undermines it and is not helpful. Now I've got one more comment here. Let's see. Do you think, this is from Nanny H. Do you think voting on the machines in person is better than mail-in ballots in terms of potential manipulation of ballots? That's a good question, actually. I will say this. I think we should have paper ballots 100%. So I understand the point. And I think we should do hand counting. And if we use machines to do counting because it's allegedly more efficient, we should have a hand count verification as well. But in our current system in Salt Lake County, if you vote in person, you are voting on a machine versus if you send in your mail-in ballot. I prefer the machine, not the machine. I prefer voting in person because I show my ID, I go and I vote, and in this case, it's on a machine. But I know that I know that they will never be able to change my vote because ballot adjudication is not an issue with the in-person voting. If you use a mail ballot in Salt Lake County, when it goes to the county clerk's office, if there are any marks on it that make it so the software cannot read your paper ballot, they can adjudicate that vote, and they could change your vote during the adjudication process. They won't admit to this. They'll always say, oh, you should trust everybody that is touching your ballot. I don't trust people like that. I actually think, as I've said many times before, Utah is the fraud capital of the country. It is the fraud capital of the country. So I will not just blindly trust people. And I'm definitely not blindly trusting people that are running our election system. And so I like to avoid that problem. I think if a better system is when I lived in Texas, I was primarily voting in person, and you would fill out the sheet, the bubbles, and then you would stick it into the tabulator yourself. So it gets scanned in. If there's a problem, it would kick it back. That's actually, I think, a much better system because you're able to make sure that there were no problems with your ballot right there, and then you're good to go. I think to my point earlier, are there improvements to be made? Yes, we need to have better in-person voting. And maybe in 2026, if we get a new party chair who is better at messaging and kind of follows some of what I laid out today, we'll have a new county clerk who will try to do this in the future. Okay, we are at 7 o'clock. And so thank you so much for everybody that listened today. This is the Goud Crowd. And we will be back next Monday. So in the meantime, have a good Thanksgiving. I hope you have a wonderful time with your families and friends. There will be no weekly rundown this week, just so everybody knows that. And so I'm going to sign off until next time and enjoy your holiday. Thanks for listening.